The day my father looked me in the eye and said, "Your brother would never let this family down," I realized I had spent 28 years trying to earn something that was never going to be offered to me. Not because I wasn't enough, but because they had already decided who the good one was before I even had a chance to prove myself. My brother's name is Dominic. He is 2 years younger than me, and from the moment he was born, the air in our house shifted. I am Rachel. I was 6 when my mother brought him home from the hospital, and I remember standing at the doorway of her bedroom, watching her hold him like he was made of something rare. She looked up at me and smiled, but it was the kind of smile you give a guest. Polite, temporary. I grew up in a small house in Columbus, Ohio. My father worked in logistics and my mother did bookkeeping part-time from home. We were not poor, but we were careful with money in the way that families are when one bad month can undo 3 good ones. I understood that early. I started babysitting at 13, not because anyone asked me to, but because I saw the tension in my parents' faces when the heating bill came, and I wanted to stop feeling helpless about it. Dominic did not babysit. Dominic played video games and left dishes in the sink and borrowed my mother's car without asking, and came home late on school nights. And every single time my parents found a reason why it was fine. He was going through something. He was going through something. He was just being a teenager. He needed more space to figure himself out. I was never going through anything. I never needed space. I was just expected to keep moving forward quietly, which I did. I was a good student because I knew it was the only currency I had. I got into Ohio State on a partial academic scholarship and worked 2 part-time jobs to cover the rest. My parents came to my orientation and took photos and said they were proud, and I held on to that for a long time because moments like that were not common. Dominic, 4 years later, got into a community college 20 minutes from home and my mother threw him a party. There were balloons. There was a cake with his name on it. I had not gotten a cake. I graduated in 3.5 years with a degree in accounting and took a job at a mid-sized firm in Cincinnati. I was 22 years old, making $52,000 a year, living in a studio apartment with one window that faced a parking garage. I was proud of myself in the private way you learn to be proud when no one else is keeping track. 6 months after I started working, my mother called and told me that Dominic had dropped out of community college. She said it like she was reporting the weather. He just wasn't ready, she said. He needed time. I asked what he was going to do and she said he was going to stay home for a while and figure things out. And my father was going to help him look for work when he was feeling more settled. I said okay. I didn't know what else to say. 3 months after that, my father called me. He said things had gotten a little tight. Dominic was still job hunting and there had been some unexpected car repairs and the property tax had come in higher than they budgeted. He asked if I could help out. Just temporarily, just until Dominic got on his feet. He said it in the tone people use when they already know the answer and are just waiting for you to catch up. I said yes. I transferred $800 that week. That was the beginning. Within a year, the transfers had become a quiet assumption. Some months, it was $600. Some months, it was $1,200 when something broke or Dominic needed new tires or my mother wanted to visit her sister in Florida. They never asked directly after that first call. My mother would mention in conversation that things were a little stretched, and I would ask how much, and she would say whatever the number was, with a kind of practiced casualness that I spent a long time not examining too closely. I told myself it was temporary. Dominic was going to find something steady soon. My parents were getting older and it was natural to help. I was the one with the stable job, so I was the one who could do this. These were the things I told myself, and for a while they were enough. What I did not tell myself, because I did not let myself look at it directly, was that in the same period I was quietly sending money home every month. My parents were telling everyone that Dominic was their rock. He was around, he helped with the yard. He drove my mother to her doctor appointments. He was there. I was in Cincinnati, which in my family's language meant I had chosen distance. I had chosen my career over my family. I had chosen myself. I heard this in the subtext of 100 small conversations. The way my mother would say, Dominic remembered to call on my birthday, just slightly too pointedly. The way my father would mention that Dominic had fixed the leaking faucet himself, as though competence with a wrench was a virtue I had failed to develop. The way they spoke about him at Christmas with a warmth that filled the room and then turned to me with a kind of careful politeness, like they were trying to be fair to a colleague they didn't know very well. I kept sending the money. By the time I was 26, I had been promoted twice and was earning $78,000 a year. I had moved into a better apartment. I had started a small investment account. I had also, over the previous 4 years, sent my parents somewhere between $35,000 and $40,000, never in one lump sum. Always in the quiet way we had established, always without acknowledgement or thanks or any indication that it was happening at all. Dominic, during this time, had worked at a call center for 8 months, then a warehouse for 5 months, then a landscaping company for 4 months, then nothing for a while, then a delivery job that lasted almost a year before he quit because the hours were too early. He was 24 and living at home, and my parents described him as figuring it out and finding his path, which were phrases I had learned to translate as, "We are not going to ask anything of him." Then Dominic decided he wanted to start a business. He wanted to open a food truck. He had a concept, he said. He had done research. He just needed startup capital to get the truck, get the permits, stock the equipment. He gave my parents a number, $60,000. My parents, without calling me first, without asking me anything, told Dominic they would make it work. I found out on a Sunday in November when my mother called and said they needed to talk to me about something, and then my father got on the line and explained, in the tone he used for things that were already decided, that they had been looking into a personal loan and wanted to know if I would co-sign. I asked him to repeat that. He repeated it. They needed a co-signer because their credit wasn't strong enough on its own, and Dominic didn't have a credit history that any bank would accept. If I co-signed, the loan would go through. It was for $60,000. I would not be responsible for the payments, he said. Dominic would handle everything. They just needed my name on the paperwork so the bank would approve it. I asked what happened if Dominic didn't make the payments. My father said that wasn't going to happen. I asked what happened legally if it did. My father said I was being negative and that family didn't think that way about each other. I didn't co-sign. I said I needed time to think about it, which in my family translated immediately into, Rachel is being selfish again. My mother called me 3 days later and said she just wanted me to understand how much this meant to Dominic, how hard he had been working toward this, how this was his real chance to build something. I asked her what she thought he had been doing for the past 2 years, and she said that wasn't fair. Everyone moves at their own pace, and then she asked if I had thought more about the cosign. I said no. I said I wasn't going to do it. The silence on the phone was the kind that has weight. She said she was disappointed in me. She said Dominic would have done it for me without a second thought. I did not point out that Dominic had never done anything for me. Not because I was keeping score, but because I knew it would not land the way I meant it. I just said I was sorry she felt that way, and we got off the phone. And I sat in my kitchen for a long time after. 2 weeks later, my aunt called me. She had heard, she said, that I had refused to help the family when they needed me. She had heard that I was doing very well for myself, and it was a shame I couldn't find it in my heart to support my brother's dream. I asked her where she had gotten her information, and she said the family knew. That's all, the family talked. I asked if the family also knew that I had been sending money home every month for 4 years, and there was a pause, and she said she hadn't heard anything about that. No one had heard anything about that, because I had never told anyone, because it had never been mentioned. I want to be clear about what happened next, because I've thought about it many times and I want to be precise. I did not make a dramatic decision in a moment of rage. I sat with it for almost 3 weeks. I went to work and came home and cooked dinner and thought about it quietly while I did other things. I thought about my father's face at my college orientation and the way he had said he was proud, and I thought about whether that was real or whether it was something he performed because it was the right thing to do in the moment. I thought about my mother calling to tell me Dominic had dropped out of college with the same tone she used for the weather. I thought about the $38,000, roughly, that I had moved into their account in small quiet increments over 4 years, and the fact that no one in my family knew it was from me. Then I stopped the transfers. I didn't announce it. I didn't write a letter or make a phone call. I just stopped. The first month they didn't say anything. The second month, my mother called to mention things were a little tight, her usual phrasing, and I said I was also going through a stretched period and I'd let her know when I had more flexibility. She said okay and got off the phone quickly, and I could tell she was surprised but didn't want to push it directly. The third month, my father called. He did not open with pleasantries. He said they hadn't received any help from me in 2 months, and he wanted to understand what was happening. I still remember the casual shrug. As she handed me 200 of a shattered and about family and love. I said I had been contributing to their household for 4 years and I needed a break. He said, "What, contributing?" I said, "The monthly transfers." And he said, "What monthly transfers?" And I realized in that moment that either my mother had never told him the details, or he had genuinely not been paying attention to where the money was coming from. I told him the number, the monthly average, the rough total, the 4 years. I stayed very calm. I had practiced this, not in a mirror but in my head, the way you rehearse things you know are coming. There was a long silence. Then he said, "That's not possible. Dominic has been," and he stopped. I waited. He said he needed to talk to my mother, and he would call me back. He did not call me back that day. He called me back 4 days later and the tone was different, quieter, and he said that he and my mother had looked through their records and they could see the transfers now and they understood that it had been me. I asked what they had thought before, when the money was coming in. He said they thought it was Dominic. I asked how. Dominic had not held a job longer than a year in the past 4 years. Dominic was living at home. Where did they think Dominic was getting $800 to $12,200 a month to send to them? My father said Dominic had told them he had savings from his warehouse job and some freelance work on the side. He said it quietly like he already knew how it sounded. I asked if they had ever asked Dominic for bank records, the way they had asked me for a co-signature. He didn't answer that. We talked for a long time that night, the longest real conversation my father and I had had in years, maybe ever. He was not apologetic in the way I had imagined or hoped. He was more confused, I think, genuinely trying to process how 4 years of financial reality had been running in a direction he had not perceived. He kept saying he hadn't known, and I believed him, and I also knew that not knowing was its own kind of choice. My mother called me the next day. She cried, which she does in the way people cry when they are upset with themselves, but it comes out directed outward. She said she felt terrible. She said she had just assumed. She didn't know why she had assumed. She was sorry. I asked her what she thought now about the cosign request. She was quiet for a moment and then she said that she could see how that had seemed unfair to me. I said it wasn't about seeming. It was unfair. She said yes. It was. Dominic called me about a week later. I had been waiting for this call and also dreading it. He opened by saying he heard Mom and Dad had found out about some money stuff and he just wanted to explain. I said okay. He said he had meant to tell them the money was coming from him eventually, and he was building toward a point where it would be true, where he would be making enough that he could have been the one sending it, and he just hadn't gotten there yet. He said it with a kind of earnest delivery that I think was genuine, which almost made it worse. I said, "Dominic, you told our parents you were sending them savings from a warehouse job. For 4 years. He said he knew how it looked. I said I needed him to understand something. I was not angry that he needed help. I was not angry that he was still figuring things out. I was angry that for 4 years I had been paying for his story. I had been funding a version of him that didn't exist, and while I was doing that, my parents were comparing us in his favor. Every conversation about how present he was, how reliable, how he was their support, all of that was running on my money and my name was nowhere in it. He was quiet for a while. Then he said he was sorry. It came out small and I think it was real. I said okay. I said I needed time. The food truck did not happen. Without the cosign, the bank wouldn't approve the loan, and without the loan there was no truck, and Dominic eventually took a job at a logistics company, the same industry as my father, which felt like something. My parents adjusted their expenses. My mother picked up a few more bookkeeping clients. Things tightened and then slowly stabilized. I went home for Thanksgiving that year, the first time in 3 years I had made the drive. It was different in ways that were hard to name. My parents were more careful with me, more attentive, which should have felt good, and mostly did. though there was a layer underneath it that felt like they were being careful in the way you are careful with someone whose reaction you are no longer sure you can predict. Dominic sat across from me at the table and we talked about normal things, work and weather and a show we had both been watching, and it was okay. It was not the Thanksgiving I had always wanted, but it was honest in a way the others had not been. My father said something to me that evening while we were cleaning up. He said that he had been thinking about the years I had spent sending money without saying anything, and he wanted to know why I hadn't told them. I said I thought if I had to explain why it mattered to be acknowledged, it would matter less. He looked at me for a moment and then he nodded slowly, and I don't know if he fully understood, but it was the closest we had come to understanding each other in a long time. I still talk to my parents. I still talk to Dominic. Things are not repaired in the way that means the old cracks are gone. They are repaired in the way that means we are all more honest about where the cracks are and we move through the rooms more carefully. That is not the ending I would have written for myself when I was 6 years old, standing in the doorway of my mother's bedroom, watching her hold something rare. But I have learned that the endings you write for yourself at 6 are almost never the ones that actually heal you. What I know now is this. I spent years believing that if I gave enough, quietly enough, eventually the giving would become visible, that the sheer volume of it would be impossible to ignore. I was wrong about that. Invisibility is not a temporary state that effort can overcome. It is a role that gets assigned early, and the only way out of it is to stop performing the role, even when stopping feels like losing. I did not stop to punish anyone. I stopped because I finally understood that I was not obligated to fund a story that erased me from it, and the moment I stopped, the story had to change. That is the only version of justice I have found that actually works, not making people see what they refuse to see, but removing yourself from the conditions that made their blindness possible. I am 31 now. I have a good job, an apartment I love, and a small group of people who know exactly who I am and what I've built and say so without me having to ask. I call my parents on Sundays. Sometimes it's easy, and sometimes it's still a little careful, but it's real now, in a way it wasn't before. Dominic and I had dinner last spring when I came through Columbus. He picked up the check without making a thing of it. It was a small thing, and it was enough. I don't need to be the favorite anymore. I still remember the casual shrug. I still remember the casual shrug. I still remember the casual shrug. That moment at Dark Day and what I know about family and love is to be seen accurately. Not perfectly, not constantly, but truly. By myself first, and then by the people who matter. That turned out to be more than enough.